We are in a situation where there are people who try to learn swimming by distance education, which you can't. Obviously, you can't learn swimming by postal tuition. You have to get involved. You have to be part of the process. You have to jump into the water. And therefore, spiritual experience is also one such. It is not just a philosophical exercise of your learning a process of understanding the Bhagavad Gita or the Quran or the Bible or whatever text you follow, but it is a question of your getting involved in it in serious terms and becoming one who is capable of experiencing that supreme joy, that ecstasy that comes out of your relationship with the divine. It is very rare that you come across somebody who has gone through that experience, who has lived this experience, and who can at the same time talk to you. I requested Sri Yam to speak about his personal experience of his travels in the Himalayas and his meeting great personalities who are realized souls. This great seer among men, Sri Mumtaz Ali Khan, Guru M to all of us. He is not on a pedestal as a guru. He is with you like a friend. He is one who guides you by your hand. He takes you along his path. There is no distance between you, between the disciple and the guru in this case. And therefore, it makes it all the more easy for a disciple to follow him.
Akhanda mandalakaram vyaptam yena characharam tatpadam darshitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jnanatimmirandasya jnananjanam shalakaya chakshurumilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurur Sakshat Paraparam Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. From young age, he has described that I was born in a Muslim family. But from a very young age, my interest was always first in spiritual matters, and more than that, in the Hindu way of life and Hindu philosophy. How could this come about when you are born in a particular setup and when you are trained from childhood in a particular religion? Is it possible for the mind of a young child to shift from one way of thinking to another at that age? In the Madhuri oru question varum. Fact is, I believe, and it is also my personal experience, that one passes through many lives. What we see in this life is a very short life from birth to death. But before this there have been many more, and after this there may be many more to come. So there are many influences working inside our mind which move us towards a certain way of life. Which is why in one family you may have 4 children, and the 4 children may turn out in 4 different ways. In the same way, there is a possibility that someone who was influenced in his past one life or many lives in a particular way of life is born in a different setup in this life and continues to move along this path. Now, this biography of mine, which is an autobiography, Apprenticed to a Himalayan Master, a Yogi's autobiography, is an attempt to put to the public, to the readers, these experiences which I have had since my childhood. Some of them even cover a little bit of what is before this life, which people may believe or may not believe. That is not the intention is to make one understand what I have experienced in my life from childhood to now. I am 63 years old now. This is the whole thing. Now, it is also an attempt to show that one can also live a normal life, so-called normal life. You may not be absolutely normal. Have a family, have your children, do your work, earn your living, and still be spiritually inclined. There is no bar on this, provided we are a little careful in what we do and how we live. Now, there must be a basic starting point for all this. It has to be somewhere where I really began to see something different. And that point, I would say, first of all, I must say that what is the truth from this philosophical and religious point of view, spiritual point of view, cannot actually be expressed in words. And when we express something in words, actually it cannot be the absolute truth, because truth cannot be put into any language or any words. So, we can only describe our lives and how we are connected to that truth. We cannot actually describe the truth because it is not possible to do so humanly. So, what I am trying to start with now is the first point, which you might call the first impulse, which prompted me to move in this direction of understanding the spiritual truths. Why understanding the spiritual truths? Going from the southern end of India, which is in Kerala, in Trivandrum, go straight up to the Himalayas at the age of 19. Now, there has to be something that ignites this, some process, some impulse, and that impulse, I will tell you a little story about how this happened to me when I was a small child of around 8.5, 9 years old. Now, as already I told you, my parents belonged to the Islamic religion. They were not orthodox, but they followed generally the principles. And I was the eldest son among three children. And therefore, they had great hopes that I would also take up some kind of a business career and make money as they did. So, we were financially quite well off when I was a child. And this was in Trivandrum, which is the capital of Kerala. Although I was born and brought up in Kerala, we used to speak Urdu at home because we do not originally belong to Kerala, but we are 100 years ago settlers to Kerala from the north. Now, behind our house in Trivandrum, which many of our friends have seen, the house, there was a very big backyard, the garden. And in that backyard, there was a jackfruit tree, big jackfruit tree. Tamil la enna solluvaanga adu jackfruit, panaskai, something like that. Okay. Under the jackfruit tree one evening, when I was playing and when everybody else had gone home, it must have been around 6 o'clock, 6:15 in the evening, I saw under the jackfruit tree, which is in the last end of the garden, somebody standing. Now, there was nobody there before, but then when I turned and looked, the person was standing there again. I looked from far. He was a tall man, very fair, bare-bodied, except for a small cloth around the waist, and long hair which was matted and kept like a crown on the head. And he was wearing some beads in his neck, which now I know were the Rudraksha beads, but then I did not know. I have never seen Rudraksha in my life at that age. And he had a water pot in his hand, which now I identify as a kamandalu. So I looked back and he waved his hand in a gesture saying, "Come forward." Normal reaction is at this time to be afraid and not go, because there is a stranger standing there, we don't know where he has come from. But I moved forward, and as I approached him close by and stood looking at him, I think I was quite stunned, because I was just looking at him and wondering, who is this man, because the eyes were extraordinarily bright and large. He gestured for me to go closer, so I went closer. He put his hand on my head and said in Hindi, "When the time comes, everything will be all right." That's the only sentence uttered. "Jab samay hoga, sab theek ho jayega." Now, because we speak Urdu at home, I understood exactly what he said. And then I stood rooted to the spot looking at this person. After some, I don't know, maybe few seconds, he told me, "Vapas jao, go back." So, like a robot, I turned and went back towards the house. Now, the last door at the back of the garden is the kitchen door. So, I came up to the kitchen door and I turned round to see if there was anybody under the jackfruit tree. There was nobody under the jackfruit tree. I am not saying that I saw him disappear, but when I turned and looked, there was nobody there. Now, I went into the kitchen and I remember that my mother was cooking something. Now, what happens when a boy of 9 sees something extraordinary? He has to tell somebody. So, my mother is the nearest person I can talk to. So, I went to my mother and I wanted to tell her that I saw somebody standing under the jackfruit tree and he has blessed me. But every time I tried to say this to her, I could not speak. My throat used to get jammed. My tongue used to get stuck. So, I decided maybe this is not something which we should discuss. I tried it a few times, but it never worked. But something extraordinary happened to me after that time, and that was every night when I went to sleep around midnight, I would be woken up from my sleep, not by anybody, but I used to just wake up. And then we used to all sleep in one room. My father, my mother, we all used to sleep in one room those days. So, I had to get up quietly and sit without disturbing anybody. So, I used to get up, sit quietly on the bed, sometimes lie down on the bed because I didn't want anybody to see what was happening. And there was a very blissful, happy feeling in the heart center somewhere here, and a kind of silvery light of something rotating. Nobody had taught me anything about this before. So, I used to lie down, close my eyes, put both my hands on that area, in that area, and just allow myself to see that light. Sometimes the light would go and I would see those beautiful eyes of the person I saw under the jackfruit tree. Sometimes the eyes would melt away and there would be only this beautiful light which spread throughout the body, and one would feel very, very happy and blissful. This experience continued every night for several years. Apart from that, during this time, I used to have several other experiences about which, even though I have written the autobiography, I don't think it's a good idea to discuss. We'll keep it for the future. Anyway, so this continued. Now, after this, all the books and all the knowledge that is required to walk on the spiritual journey began to unfold itself to me in different ways. Like, if I used to go to the library, you must remember that by now I was growing up. This happened when I was 9, then I was 10, 11. As I grew up, I started visiting the library, and there somebody would say, "Oh, this book is good for you, read it." I would get books by complete works of Swami Vivekananda at the age of 11 and 12. It's not easy to read Vivekananda, but since I was educated in the English medium, reading English was not a problem for me, and we went to the best schools and I had the best teachers. Still, some things I read and understood, some things I did not. But what I am trying to say is that all the knowledge that is required began to come in mysterious ways. Somebody giving you a book, or you go to the library and you are searching for a book and some book falls from the top and falls in your hands. We cannot explain this. Then I also started meeting people who were highly spiritual and who were in that locality. My first experience of seeing a spiritual person was that one day I was standing in in my house when I was maybe 11 years old, wearing shorts and bare-bodied, and from the road I heard some sound of bhajan kirtan. Somebody is playing drums and there is a sound of cymbals. And I was curious, so I went and looked, and I saw that this group of people were playing drums and playing cymbals, and there was one man walking in front wearing only a 𝗏𝗶, a small 𝗏𝗶, covering his private parts, a fair looking tall man, and his eyes were closed. He was walking, but there were tears coming down his eyes, and he seems to be smiling. This was the first thing I saw. When I saw this, I felt something very nice, and there were two boys were collecting money. So I ran inside, took some money which was lying there, and brought it and gave it to him. Late, and I saw the neighbors coming out and washing the feet of this gentleman who was walking in front. Later on, I came to know that it was someone called 𝗦𝗶 who had an ashram not far from our house in the fort. And when I was in college, I used to visit him frequently and have long chats with him many times. This was the first experience, and this continued. Wherever there was a holy man nearby, somehow or the other I would be exposed to that person. This included Hindus, Muslims. There were some Muslim saints. There was a Muslim saint who lived close by whom I used to go and visit. You might say Muslim saint meaning a Sufi saint, like a dargah. When you go to a dargah, it's not a mosque, it's not a place where you do your prayers. It is a tomb of a great saint. That's called a dargah. A place where people worship is called masjid, but generally both are kept together so that people can go down and then come and worship. And so it continued till the age of 19, when I decided to quit and go off to the Himalayas one fine day. So as I was saying, extraordinary people, whoever came to the neighborhood, I would somehow get an opportunity to meet them. Now I was a little weak in mathematics, so there was a group, a family living near our house, where there was Mr. Ramaswamy, who was actually an accountant in the Accountant General's office, and my friend 𝗦𝗿𝗶 was his nephew. 𝗦𝗿𝗶 later on became a very famous neurologist in Trivandrum. He was head of the Department of Neurology in Trivandrum. Now he runs his own hospital. I used to go to their house because Mr. Ramaswamy used to teach me mathematics tuition. So one day when I went there, that must have been when I was around 10 years old, I went to Ramaswamy's house, 𝗦𝗿𝗶's house, and they told me today there is no tuition. I said, why? No, Swami has come, so there is no tuition. So I said, which Swami has come? No, you will not be interested, some Swamiji has come. Then 𝗦𝗿𝗶, my friend 𝗦𝗿𝗶's mother came out. That is Mr. Ramaswamy's aunt, and she said, our Swami, they used to talk in Tamil, they were Pillays settled in Trivandrum. She said, Swami vandirkaru, adanal there is no tuition today. Half Malayalam in the tuition illa. So I said, all right. Then I said, can I also see the Swami? She said, I will have to find out, you stand here. So she went inside. It was a small house with little doors, old model house. She went inside, and after some time she came out and she said, come inside. So I go inside. There is a small drawing room, very small. In that there is one chair in the middle. On that chair somebody is sitting. Agarbattis are lit and some people are standing around like this, and there is a man sitting in front. Now normally if you see a Swami, you will think somebody with kashaya, vastra or some matted, nothing. Hair short cut, like a summer crop, white hair, well built, clean shaved, slack shirt up to here, white slack shirt, nicely ironed, white dhoti, and one white cloth tied like a cross belt. Individual sitting there. They have put a small footstool to put his legs on. So he saw me. They must have told who I was. So he very lovingly said, Malayalam, come here. So I went, come here, sit down. So I sat down. Then he put his hands on my head and massaged the head nicely. And he said, Nalla kutti, good boy. He said, good boy. He kept on repeating this. And then I looked at his eyes. Now these eyes were also quite powerful. They were not so big, they were small eyes. But there was something very quite extraordinary about it. Because for some time, my mind became absolutely blank. There was nothing. No, there was no thinking, there was nothing. I don't know how to describe it. For some time I was in a vacuum. And then I quickly woke up because he was still rubbing my head, and I got up. I also did namaskaram. I saw everybody doing namaskaram. So we are not accustomed to doing namaskaram in the house. I did namaskaram and I came off. That was my only meeting with this great man. Later on, I came to know through various sources, also by reading a book, which are his little talks, that his name was 𝗦𝗶 𝗠. His name was actually 𝗦𝗶 𝗶, and he was working in the Accountant General's office or something, took voluntary retirement. He was there, and I don't think he was in the Accountant General's office. He used to go to court every day because he had many property cases, and he was unmarried, but he was a great saint. Now this 𝗦𝗶 𝗠 was like an ordinary man in the sense that he didn't change his clothes, he didn't wear saffron robes, he didn't have matted hair, nothing. But he was not married, he was single, he had a large family, and every once in a week in a homeopath's clinic in a place called 𝗦𝗶 𝗠, at midnight he used to have some satsangs. And during that satsangs, even sannyasins in that area used to come and attend to this satsang. And he did not have any organization, he did not have any board, any name. Because his name was 𝗦𝗶 𝗶, everybody called him 𝗦𝗶 𝗠. That's all. That's all. Many years later, I came across a book which is a collection of his discussions, satsangs, which was called, now I forget the name. Anyway, when I read that, it was in Malayalam, 𝗦𝗶. When I read that book, then I discovered that this 𝗦𝗶 𝗠, this great person, was a person who had reached the heights of spiritual understanding and illumination, and trying to explain this in simple language to people. Now, Vedanta is a very highly abstract way of looking at truth. It is not for everybody. Now, 𝗦𝗶 𝗠 must be given credit for making it so simple that any ordinary man could understand what he was trying to say. He has quoted many wonderful books as he talked. One of them, which I remember very clearly, is what is called the Harinama Sankirtanam. In the Harinama Sankirtanam, it always is like a Sankirtana. Sankirtana means in the evening all the family sits together in Kerala and sings like a bhajan, Harinama Sankirtanam. And the end of every stanza is Hari Narayanaya Namah. This is how it ends. But before that, the stanza contains profound Vedantic truths, and 𝗦𝗶 𝗠's most favorite sloka from the Harinama Sankirtanam was, it explains the essence of Vedantic thought actually. It explains what is the Supreme Being and what is our connection to the Supreme Being, and who are we actually in our true essence. Harinama Sankirtanam, which he was very fond of, that part was Kanninu kannu manamagum kannu adunu kannai idunna porul Tanannariyumalavanandamendu Hari Narayanaya Namah. This was the sloka. Now, if you understand this, he has explained it so nicely, Gopala Swami, saying that, see, the eye of the eye, we have two eyes. If both my eyes are open and I am looking at all the scenery in front of me, but if my mind is not there, I will see nothing. The image will be there like a camera in my eye, but I actually won't be seeing what is in front of me. If my mind is in the Himalayas, then even though I am looking at the camera, my mind will be seeing only the Himalayas. On the other hand, if my mind and the eye are both engaged in looking at something, then I am actually seeing. So, the mind is that which recognizes what you see. Otherwise, you can open your eyes and see many things, but will not recognize anything. If you are in anesthesia and if your eyes are open, the images will fall in the retina because your lenses are there in the eye, but you will not recognize them because your mind is not there. So, the eye of the eye, kanninu kannu, manamagum kannu, is the mind. Now, he says, suppose I find out the eye, which is also the eye of the mind, how wonderful and blissful it would be for me. Now, this is the whole essence of Vedanta, which means that truly we are not this body. We are in essence a spiritual spark, which is called the Atman, which is the witness, Sakshi, to everything that is happening. All our problems is that we mistake the body to be the true self, and the true self is a spark of the divine. So, such wonderful teachings were put by Gopala Swami in such simple language, and later on when he passed away, there is a story, it is very interesting, told to me by my friend, the doctor, who was a neurologist, who is now a neurologist. Said he was admitted to hospital because he had some stomach problem. They wanted to operate him because they suspected something in the tumor in the intestines, so they gave him anesthesia. So, in the middle of the anesthesia, after the operation was done, the anesthesia remains for some time. But just after the operation, while the doctors thought that he was still in the anesthetic state, he opened his eyes, tried to get up and said, "It is all over," and went back to anesthesia. It was quite a shock to the people in the medical profession because this never happens usually. And he passed away in the operation table. No elaborate samadhi. Of course, his samadhi is there in a place called Samadhi Totem, near Samadhi Totem, where you can go and see it even today. So, such extraordinary people I started meeting almost on a daily basis, I should say. So, now I will tell you another extraordinary meeting which I had. In Trivandrum, on the beach, near the Shangamugam beach, there is a tomb of a Muslim saint, and that tomb is called 𝗵𝗶, where lots of people go there. Now, there is a mosque also there, but it is a dargah, basically a tomb, samadhi of somebody. Bhima, BV, is supposed to be the saint who is buried there. People who are possessed or so-called possessed, who are mentally ill, they are taken there and tied to the trees, and they are supposed to be cured after some time. So, my grandmother, some of my uncles, we all went to 𝗵𝗶 one day when I was a small boy, maybe 10 years, 11 years old. While we were in and when we came out, I used to be very frightened of the place because suddenly you see people screaming and jumping, saying, "We are possessed, please don't harm us, don't kill us," and things like that. So, I used to be very frightened. So, I came out of the dargah and I was standing outside the gate when I saw a naked man walking. He looked like a complete madman with mud all over his body and no clothes, and he was walking across, and behind him there were many people following with their hands like this. So, I could not understand anything. I came out, then he saw me and he looked at me. Then in Tamil, extraordinary because we are talking about Kerala, in Tamil suddenly he said, "Pavam nalla paiyan." like that. And then he took some mud and sand and threw it like this at my feet, and he went off. I was quite astonished. In fact, I was frightened because I thought it was a madman. Later on, many years later, I discovered that he was a Sufi saint whose name was 𝗦𝗶 𝗠 and who used to be naked most of the time. When you say naked, that means he has no consciousness of the body. Like a baby which is born has no consciousness of the body, doesn't need any clothes. He was like that. And whenever people gave him a mundu, dhoti, he used to tie it and walk around the fisherman's colony. And some fisherman will come and say, Swami, mundilla, he will open it and give it to him and come away naked. Such a person. And later on in life, I had some extraordinary experiences with 𝗦𝗶 𝗠 Sahib. I remember that once when I was, we will shift to when I was 16, 17 years. I went once saying that I will go and meet 𝗦𝗶 𝗠, whom I had met as a small child. So we went there. I went there alone. I saw him sitting in front of a small tea shop, tea kade, hotel, and drinking tea, keeping it there, smoking a beedi or a cigarette, then throwing it off, again smoking, throwing it off, like a madman. And he was always laughing and talking to somebody. We cannot see anybody. So anybody would think that he is a completely madman. Sometimes I wonder if we are mad or they are mad. I think they must be thinking that we are completely mad, because we live in a mad world, while we think they are mad. Anyway, so he was sitting there in front of the tea shop, sipping tea. I went. There was a big crowd, so I stood around. Suddenly he saw me in the middle of the crowd. Inge va, he said. So I went and sat down. Most of the time nobody knows what he talks. It is neither Tamil nor Malayalam. It's simply a babble. And then he was, half the tea was drunk. If you look at him, his teeth, they are so black, you would think that he has even brushed his teeth since his birth. He was drinking that tea, half the tea. He put back half the tea into the cup. He gave it to me and he said, Kudi. So I was in a dilemma whether to drink this tea and get sick or to refuse to drink. So that hotel owner was standing next to me. He said, Kudi, drink, drink. So I drank it. Then again the same thing. Periya Thiridan, he said. Periya Thiridan, Thiridit Poidwan. Like that he said. So I thought, why is he calling me a Thiridan? I mean, I have never stolen in my life anything. So I thought, I must be a bad man, so he is calling me a Thiridan. Later on, when I met my master, Babaji, he suddenly reminded me once. He said, did so and so call you a thief? I said, yes. He said, do you know the story of Krishna stealing butter? I said, yes. Then he said, that kind of stealing is when you steal somebody's heart. He said, when you fall in love, what do you do? Do you go and ask legitimately, give me your heart? You steal it, right? I said, yes. He said, that is what he meant. Then only I was relieved that he was not calling me a thief. So it's extraordinary that somebody should say like that to me. Anyway, I came away. Then I started practicing a lot of Hatha Yoga and Pranayam and all that. And one day something went wrong or right, I cannot say. There was a rush of energy in my system and I forgot where I was. I had gone actually to the seashore and I forgot. For many days I didn't go back home because I was not aware what had happened and I was wandering around the seashore, apparently. So the hotel owner where 𝗦𝗶 𝗠 used to sit told me that he found me one day in this state and he brought me to 𝗦𝗶 𝗠, who was then not in front of the hotel, he was on the beach near the sea. So I believe he took an old bucket and filled it with sand and put the whole sand on the head, covered the whole thing and massaged, and After some time I opened my eyes and I asked him, where am I? So, which means that there was some connection between him and the experience which I had, or he was trying to save me from some extraordinary, the practice of certain forms of yoga and pranayama are fraught with danger unless you have a teacher, proper guide, because you are dealing with your nervous system, you are dealing with your brain, which is the controlling center of the whole body. So, if something goes wrong here and there, there is a possibility that one might completely lose control of what is happening. So, which is why they say always that there has to be a teacher, especially in such practices, who can personally supervise and see that nothing goes wrong. Anyway, so I was saved by him by throwing this mud on my head and saying, something he said, I didn't hear, but that's what the hotel owner said. 𝗶 𝗠, said 𝗶 𝗠, and put sand on the head, woke me up, and I opened my eyes and said, where am I? Then they changed my clothes, I took mundu and shirt, and I went back home after 6 or 7 days. My mother used to always remember that, but unfortunately she is not there now, she is gone. So anyway, that was another extraordinary experience I had. Then the third one, which I want to say, I don't think I have mentioned these experiences in a very detailed way in the autobiography itself, this particular thing which I said just now. Anyway, now the third is about an extraordinary lady called 𝗦𝗶, who used to live in Kanyakumari. In those days, if you go and wander around the temple, there is a Kanyakumari temple, below that is the ghats, and there you find lot of rocks. You would have found a lady who you would have mistaken to be a completely mad person. Yeah, she used to be surrounded by dogs all the time. There would be a circle of dogs, and those dogs were her security guards. Nobody could go near her. If you go near, they will all stand in a circle and growl at you. And nobody knew what she ate or what she did. She used to catch fish from the sea by hand, put them together, light a fire and eat it. Or if somebody brought any food, she would accept it from them, if she accepts at all, and eat it. Now, the first time I saw 𝗦𝗶 was in, I think I was in college doing my second year pre-degree probably, and then I went there looking for her because my friends told me that there is somebody like that. So I went there. I was sitting in a hotel having my lunch because I was very hungry when I found her coming. So the hotel man said, if you offer some food, she may take it. So I bought some food and she went off. Nobody actually knew what language she spoke in, but I guess it was Bengali. So I followed her with the food and the dog started barking. Then she said something to the dogs and the dogs kept quiet. So I went, I offered her the food. First she fed the dogs. After feeding the dogs, she gave me a little bit to eat. Then she ate a little bit of food. So I was confident, now I am safe. Then I sat near her near the rock and she just kept looking at me laughing. She was completely naked. She must have been around, she looked quite old, maybe 60, 70 years old, 75 years old. And she kept on saying some things which I could not understand a word. Finally, I only understood she saying, "Jao, jao." So I came away. I thought when somebody says, "Jao, jao," you shouldn't sit there. So I quietly came off. Now, that time nothing happened. I came back home in Trivandrum, and that night when I slept, I had a very strange dream. Now, in that dream, I am sitting under a big tree. I can't remember the tree. 3 roads are meeting, and the tree is in the middle of the 3 roads like a traffic island. And I am sitting under the tree, and in the dream, I am very, very thin, and like all bones are seen. I am sitting cross-legged in Padmasana, and trying to meditate. Then from one of the roads, I see 𝗦𝗶 coming, and in the dream she is very tall, she is huge, and she has a stick in her hand and a small container in her, something she has. She comes and then she asks me for food. Now, I have no food, I am myself in a kind of starving condition. I said there is no food. Then I search around, and in my dhoti I find a small container. In olden days, film rolls used to come in aluminum containers, long film rolls. So something like that, one container. So I open it, and there are 2 grains of rice in it. So I give the 2 grains of rice to her. She eats it. Then after that she says, close your eyes. So I close my eyes. She takes that container from me, puts it between my eyebrows and applies pressure. And then from here, absolute blissful feeling comes, and my whole body is in that very blissful, semi-conscious state, I must say. But that is not the end of the story, because when this happened, I woke up. And when I woke up in my bedroom, from then till probably the afternoon, till around 4 o'clock, even though the dream was over, the feeling of that bliss and that some kind of a drunken kind of feeling, like you're drunk, you're intoxicated, that feeling remained till 4 o'clock in the evening. So much so that my mother thought that I was sick, because I could not have breakfast. I sat but I couldn't eat. I couldn't have lunch. So I went and lay down and enjoyed the bliss. I was enjoying, but others thought that I was sick. Now this continued till 4 o'clock in the evening that day. Third time I went to see 𝗦𝗶. There was no dog, nobody there. She was alone, and it was evening. I missed my bus and went very late. She didn't say a word. She just got up from there and embraced me and held me in her arms for quite some time. I was expecting that she's so full of dirt that there will be some bats, but there was a lovely smell like incense being lit. And she held me for quite some time, muttered something like moaning sound, and then suddenly let go of me and said, "Jao, jao." So I came off. So this is another extraordinary experience which came to me unasked. Not that I was looking for an experience, but things seemed to happen like that. Now there were many temples around this area in Trivandrum, and I used to go and frequent many of these temples, sit down in the evening, talk to them. By the time I was in college, so inside the fort there was the ashram of Swami Abhedananda. You might remember that I talked about him when I was a small child and he was walking on the main road with the kirtans going on. So it went on, and I used to go to meet him whenever he was in the ashram, to sit down and talk to him, and he would always advise me. One day I told him that I have picked up the practice of Kundalini Yoga by reading Swami Vivekananda's Raj Yoga, and I am doing some pranayam. So he got very worried. He said, "You don't do all that, you don't need to do all that. Bhakti is the best thing for this Kali Yuga. You just chant the names, sing the names, do kirtanas. Be careful, don't do all that." And he would never let me go without having food with him. I saw him like that many years. I learnt many things from him, especially on the bhakti scriptures, because every evening he used to have a small satsang. So I used to go and join the satsang, sit there, listen to him, and then he would say, then kazhichittu ponam, but you must eat something and go, don't go otherwise. So like this my life expanded. I used to go to school and college, but my interest was not in the subject, which is why my sister became an IAS officer and I ended up running around the Himalayas. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So, this was my life. Then, every time I went and sat on the beach or in the evenings and looked up at the clouds in the sky, I used to always imagine the Himalayas. I never thought there were clouds, I thought there were snow-clad mountains, and there was this pull to go to the Himalayas. Meanwhile, I had read most of the literature available on these topics. Vedanta, Brahma Sutras, Upanishads, mostly without any help from anyone, but I think the help was there in the form of blessings from all holy men. Then, when I was 19 years old, I had just finished my second year in the college. The results had not yet come, and I decided that I will have to quit and go away to the Himalayas for some time. I thought that this particular setup in my home was not ideal to my spiritual fulfillment. I thought I need to go to the Himalayas. Perhaps somebody was waiting for me. Maybe there is a guru waiting for me. I was not sure, but there was something that pulled me irresistibly towards the Himalayas, which for thousands of years have been the place from where wisdom has come to this country. All the great sages, the Bhagirati flows from there. The Himalayas are well known in the Puranas, in the Itihasas, even in the textbooks on Vedanta, many of the rishis taught from the Himalayas. So I decided I must go. Now I had some pocket money with me. Immediately, my only interest was that I went and bought some tickets to Delhi, to Chennai, from Chennai to Delhi, from Delhi to all unreserved, because you cannot suddenly get it. And then from there to Haridwar. The train used to go right up to Haridwar, Rishikesh in those days. Then I went to Haridwar. And a new chapter started for me in my life. Although I had to look for someone, I couldn't find someone for many years, but that is a completely different chapter, which we have to take up separately and look into, of my days in the Himalayas, of going to Haridwar, of not having any money with me, of walking all the way 200 and odd kilometers from Rishikesh to Badrinarayan, walking in 20 kilometers a day at an average, and getting my feet all swollen and cut, and suffering sometimes for want of food. Now that is a separate chapter. I think we should start it separate. In the last episode, I was saying that I was all packed and ready to go to the Himalayas. On the threshold, getting ready, packing up. Basically, packing up means not much luggage, but winding up and freeing myself to move towards the Himalayas. Now, before I go into that, I must mention a few things before we start, which I shouldn't forget to mention. One was my first visit to a temple. My first visit to a temple in my life. I had never before got into a temple because, as you all know, I was born and brought up in a Muslim family. We were not allowed to go to temples. It so happened that model high school where I went to school was not very far from a Subramanya temple. There is a Kartikeya temple there, Subramanya temple, in a beautiful campus with a lot of peacocks. The males danced and the females just stood there. And you could hear the sound of the peacocks all over the place from the campus. And it was like a hillock, and on top of that was a beautiful old Subramanya temple. Now, the priest of the temple was I forget his name, but he was a Tulu Brahmin from speaking the Tulu language from Karnataka. And his son Srinivas Rao was my classmate. So very often when I passed the temple, I used to think, maybe I should go and see the temple, what is inside. I have never visited a temple. So one day, Srinivas invited me to his house, because the priest was also staying there in a small little house. So we went there, and I was just hanging around the campus. His mother went to make a cup of coffee for me. They make very good coffee, filter coffee. So I was sitting and talking to Srinivas when I saw his father coming. His father was a tall man with sharp nose, hair tied up in a big juttu at the back. He came and he said, oh, Srinivas introduced me. So he said, oh. He said, I'm going to the temple for puja. Suddenly I asked him, can I also come? So he looked at me carefully, a very orthodox man. He said, oh, you can come, but you cannot enter in the sanctum sanctuary. You have to stay outside. So he went there, and then I heard the sound of bells ringing. I was outside. After a while, he pulled the curtains. I saw a beautiful Subramanya standing there with a veil in his hand. And on both sides, there were two Shaktis. Subramanya has two consorts, so on both sides. So after that, when we came out, after the puja was over, he gave me the prasadam. He came out, sat down, had a cup of coffee. Then I asked him, this Subramanyam is what? So he said, Subramanyam is the son of Shiva. He's a god for us, and he flies on peacocks at a very high speed. So I said, but have you seen him fly in the peacock? I was a small boy. Have you seen him fly? He said, some things cannot be seen by ordinary eyes. Certain things can only be seen with extraordinary eyes, which most people don't possess. If you purify your life and improve your mind, then you may be able to see such things. Otherwise, nobody can see such things. So I dropped the question of asking him whether you have seen it. I just kept quiet. I thought it would be wrong and insulting to ask him that question. Then I asked him, what about the two Shakti sons standing around? Does he have? He said, they are his two consorts. I said, so the gods have two wives, is it? So he smiled and said, yeah, they have two. Like Muslims, they have 4 or 5, he said. So I didn't want to say anything. I just looked at him and smiled and came away. After that, I used to quietly, surreptitiously get into the Subramanya temple. And when nobody was around, make a quick pradakshina and come out. That was my first entry into the temple. I mentioned it specifically because that was my first time that I ever saw the insides of a temple, and I was fascinated by the concept of Subramanya, who in Tamil Siddhars called him Saravana Bhava. The mantra itself is Om Saravana Bhava. He is supposed to be also the god of meditation, the Skanda, which is the leader of all the Ganas of Shiva, and the god of meditation. He is mentioned very often in the Tirumulars, Tirumantiram, many times as Kartikeya, the mystic yogi. Okay. Now the second thing I want to mention before the Himalayan trip was, which is very similar. I had another friend who was a Palghat Iyer, whose father, his parents settled from Bombay and came and settled down in Trivandrum. His father was working in the LIC, but he was also the trainer for the badminton team of the LIC. He was a very good badminton and tennis player. His name was Vishwanath Iyer, and my friend, his son's name was Ananta Narayan. He lives in Palghat now. Now I used to go to Ananta Narayan's house, which was not very far from our house, and mainly to eat very good sambar and idlis and vegetarian food. And that was the first time I realized that according to the orthodox Brahmins, a lady, when she has her menses, is not allowed to enter the kitchen. I found it out in a very funny way, because Ananta Narayan came to me one day and said, "Come home, today there is very good food." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because my father is cooking today." I said, "Why is your father cooking?" He said, "Because my mother is out." So I said, "What do you mean mother is out? She has gone somewhere?" He said, "No, she is not allowed to enter the kitchen." So that's how I found out the connection between the two. So I used to go to his house, have food. They were great devotees of Shirdi Sai Baba. So they used to have Thursday bhajans. I also used to go and join the Thursday bhajans. I even wrote the lyrics for a small song on Shirdi Sai Baba at that time. Something like "Hey Prabhu, Hey Sai Nath," something, I can't remember the whole thing. So we knew each other quite well. Now it is relevant because after many years, when I was in college, my friend Ananta Narayan went and joined the Palghat Engineering College and went away. His father was transferred from Trivandrum to Trichur. So once he sent me a letter saying, "The Trishur Puram festival is coming. It's a very important festival. Hundreds of elephants stand around the temple of Shiva, Vadakinathan temple in Trichur. Come and see the Trishur Puram, because it's full of what are they called, fireworks, heavy fireworks." So I decided to go. My friend was not there, so I was staying alone with him. This is very interesting because according to the rules, no non-Hindu can enter the Guruvayur temple. So when I went to see Vishwanath Iyer, one morning at 4 o'clock he was getting ready to go to Guruvayur. So, it's very close from Trishur. So he told me, "𝗦𝗶 𝗠, let's go to the temple." I said, "Okay, fine." So I went with him, and then we have to be bare-bodied to go inside. I wear a dhoti, and we started towards the temple. As I went towards the temple, on the entry, I found a board. Board says, "No entry for non-Hindus." So I stopped. So he went inside. I was out. He told me, "No, it doesn't matter." He said, "You look like a Brahmin boy. Who is going to find out? You come." I said, "Look, I am not coming because it is written and we should not break rules." So he went inside. After some time he came back and gave me prasadam. "Let's go." I said, "Look, I am not coming now. You go. I know the bus. You give me some money." So I got some money from him. And he said, "I will be back by evening." So he went off. It's a beautiful atmosphere around the Guruvayur temple. So I went and I waited for some time, hung around. Then when I came near the gate and saw the board, I had this unbearable pain that I could not go into the temple. So I sat just outside and started crying. So I was crying very badly actually. My whole body was shaking. Some people came around, stood, "What happened?" They thought some pain or hungry or something. I said, No, nothing. After some time they all went off. They thought must be mad, God knows what. So I got up from there, went near the temple tank. There's a beautiful temple tank there. So on the tank there is a parapet. So I sat under a tree near the parapet, wiped my tears and lay down and looked up at the sky and fell asleep. I was tired also, so I just fell asleep. Now in the sleep I had a very beautiful dream. I can't say it is a dream or a vision, but it was a dream, but it was a very vivid dream. In the dream, I was standing outside the temple, the Guruvayur temple, holding my hands like this and thinking, "Oh, I have to go inside and, have darshan of Guruvayurappan." Then from suddenly inside I heard somebody blowing the conch. So even in the dream I am thinking, "Oh, the pujari is performing the puja, he is blowing the conch." Then the conch sound the shank sound became louder and louder, and it was reverberating in my head like a bomb. And then from inside I saw the small place where the deity is kept. It's called Garbhagriha. Garbha, Sanskrit, Garbha means womb, and Griha means house. So womb, house, that means deep inside, like a child. So that Garbhagriha was coming out of the temple and becoming bigger and bigger and bigger and coming near the gate. And inside that I saw this little boy standing and playing and laughing and saying, "Come, come," like that. So in the dream I was saying, "Yamaram, I'm coming, I'm coming." And I woke up. So when I woke up, I decided that this is a good signal. Now what there is board or no board, I am going to go inside. So I went inside, had darshan, took a pradakshina, took the prasadam and came out. That is the one and only time that I could go to Guruvayur temple and come out, because now if I go, my name is in the newspapers, people will be very happy, but the Devasam board will be in trouble. So this I had to mention, because this was kind of preparatory to my going to the Himalayas. Now the other thing I want to mention is the meeting with another great yogi, Paramahansa, who also looked like he was completely mad. Near the beach in Trivandrum, there is a beach called 𝗦𝗿𝗶 beach, which is beyond Shangamukam beach. There used to be a person, nobody knows where he came from and nobody knows where he went afterwards. He disappeared after some years. They didn't even know his name, so they used to call him 𝗦𝗿𝗶 Swami. He used to be a man with matted hair and wearing a small cowpin and sleeping on the sand, and his pillow was always a heap of sand on which he kept his head and slept. And he hardly talked. Whatever food was offered by the fishermen, he ate. You can't say as vegetarian, non-vegetarian, whatever the fishermen offered, he ate. People say that if they offered him liquor, he would drink that also. But people used to go and stand around and bowed out. He would not allow somebody to touch his feet or anything. And he looked so wild that people were very frightened of going close to him. So one night I went, one evening, stood near him and was looking at him closely. I moved a little forward. Suddenly, lying there itself, with one hand he raised his body, and with the right foot he gave me one hit on the neck. It hit me somewhere here. And I remember I fell down. I fell down full of mud on my body and face. Then I got up and hit everything. And he was silent as if he had done nothing. I was lying there. I looked at him, he looked at my eyes, I also looked. And everybody around me said, "Ah, you are blessed, you are blessed." Only when he blesses, he does this thing to you. Came off. What happened was, for a long time I was having a persistent ache in my right backbone. When I went home, I suddenly realized that it was not there. It had completely vanished. So these are some of the experiences I wanted to relate before we talk about going on to the Himalayas. Also, I need to mention 3 renunciants, sannyasins, who had a profound effect on me before going to the Himalayas. One was Swami Abhedananda, who I have already mentioned, whom I met as a small child when he was doing kirtan and walking on the street, and how I used to go and meet him and get a lot of understanding about what bhakti means. He was basically a bhakta, Swami Abhedananda. The second person who influenced me was Swami Tapasyananda, who was then the president of the Ramakrishna Mission, Trivandrum, Shastamangalam, where they have a hospital. As a young boy, I used to when I was in school and in college, I used to go on Sundays and meet him and talk to him. And we also used to go and meet another professor of Malayalam who was a great teacher of Vedanta, Professor 𝗏 𝗠. I don't know if he is still around or he has passed away. He was pretty old at that time. He also lived near Peta, which was on the way to the beach. So Sundays we used to go there. Swami Tapasyananda would come and we used to sit there and have discussions on Vedanta. Swami Tapasyananda told me that Professor 𝗏 𝗠 has actually experienced the essence of Vedanta. So his wife would prepare coffee, simple man living. Yes. Now afterwards, I met Swami Tapasyananda in many places as I was traveling. Sometimes I would come back. Now in the Ramakrishna mission, there is a very important initiation, which is taking of the mantra of Sri Ramakrishna. Even though I had joined the Ramakrishna mission, spent some time in different centers of the Ramakrishna mission, I had not taken the mantra of Sri Ramakrishna from anybody, because I thought I had to find the right person to take the mantra from, because in the Ramakrishna mission only the president can give the mantra. Later on, they changed the rule and said the vice president can also give mantra diksha. That was the time when I came to Chennai once more and found that Swami Tapasyananda has been appointed vice president. But he was living in Mylapore in Madras, in the Mylapore Mutt. So one day I went to him. After a long time I was meeting him. I went to him and I said, Swamiji Maharaj, so you have come. He said, where are you now? What are you doing? I thought you must have taken sannyas after you left the mission by yourself. I said, no, I have not taken any further. Then I explained to him where I was and what I was doing. Oh, he said, met a great yogi, wonderful. I said, but I have one problem still, that I haven't taken the Ramakrishna mantra. Hey, why? You did service to Prabhu Maharaj, you should have taken. I said, no, but I didn't. Can you give me the mantra? Okay. He closed his eyes for a few minutes and then he said, okay, on Guru Purnima you come and see me at the Mutt. Those days this new temple was not there. There was the old temple in Ramakrishna mission. And said, what should I bring? He said, have a bath, bring a dhoti, some flowers and some dakshina and come. So I went. When I went, I found there were other people also, few people. But he took me aside separately, individually, on to the temple. And then he told me to sit down, went inside and meditated for a while. When he came out, I found that his face was red and flushed and his eyes were all red and flushed. And he didn't look like this same friendly Swami Tapasyananda that we know of. There was something had taken place in his mind. Anyway, he came out and then he gave me the Ramakrishna mantra, which is the Diksha mantra of the Sri Ramakrishna mission, which was first taught by Swami Vivekananda and continues down. Later on, Swami Tapasyananda introduced me to some books on Sri Vidya and Tantra, which I already had taken from Babaji, my guru. And he passed away after some years. One of the best books, translations and commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita, all the 18 chapters, was written by Swami Tapasyananda. Also, he has written a beautiful translation and commentary on the Bhagavatam, which is also worth reading. It's in English. Because I vouch for the fact that he was a genuine sadhu. Apart from being the vice president and so on, which is an administrative matter, he in his young age had done personal seva to Swami Shivananda, who is Shivananda, a direct disciple of Ramakrishna Paramahansa, who used to be known as Mahapurush Maharaj. Not only did he do seva to him, he was initiated into the mantra by him and he was given brahmacharya diksha by him. Apart from that, he had done seva to Sharda Devi, the Holy Mother, who was a consort of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and who lived for many years. Many of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples passed away, but she was alive. She lived to a ripe old age. So at a young age, Swami Tapasyananda, who hails from Vattapalam, Palghat, left home and went and met Sharada Devi, stayed with her and did seva. Then he was introduced to Swami Shivananda and he got his initiation from it. This was a great man, one of the second person who had influenced me during those years. The third was a very peculiar man again, whose name was Nilakanta Swami, but everybody used to call him Chembalandi Swami. He used to live in a remote village on the outskirts of Kerala, of Trivandrum, called Chembalandi, which also happens to be the birthplace of Sri Narayana Guru Swami. There, story is that he used to be a tea shop man who used to make tea in a small tea shop. But he was a great bhakta of Sri Rama. So very soon, in his sankalpa, he began to think of himself as Hanuman and worshipped Rama as his god. As years went by, he became so involved in the identification with Hanuman that he closed up the tea shop and everything and used to spend most of the time on the tree, eating nuts and things like that. And after some time, people found him to be a very holy man who, when he blessed, things happened. So they built a small cottage and asked him to come and settle down there. So he was living in that small cottage and everybody used to call him Chembalandi Swami. Now the college where I went to was not very far from there, the new Loyola College which had started. So one day, one afternoon, I cut class and went towards the Chembalandi and saw him sitting in a thatched hut with a thatched hall also in front. So I went and met him and did pranams. He was also a matted haired man with a long beard and wearing a small cloth, loin cloth, very, very thin, extremely thin, almost bones. He called me near to him and put his thumb in the middle of my eyebrows for it, pressed it for some time, and I felt something very tangible happening inside my system. This was before I met Babaji. I came back and I found that I was in a very calm and tranquil meditative state. But even though he was a great holy man, he was a very, very practical man who could see through pretenses very, very easily. I remember that we used to have a gathering. So everybody was sitting there together. Suddenly he asked, which deity is worshipped most in Kali Yuga? Which is the favorite god of Kali Yuga? So many people asked, offered their opinions. Somebody said Murugan, somebody said Shiva, somebody said Krishna, somebody said, it went on like that. He kept quiet. He said, anybody? Who is the favorite god of Kali Yuga? No answers. He refused everything that they said. He said, no. Adalla. And finally, he said, shall I tell you? Shall I tell you? They said, yes, Swami, please tell us. Chakram, he says, money. That is the favorite god of Kali Yuga. If that is there, everything is there. If that is not there, you will become a mad fellow like me, he said, and laughed loudly. Now, you can understand. And he had a favorite statement for Ramayana. When somebody asks, what is the definition of Ramayana? He always says, Ramayanam. That means the darkness has to move out. In Malayalam, Ra is the short form for Ratri, means night. Mayanam means it must be rubbed out, erased. He said, to understand Ramayana, the darkness must be rubbed out. So, Ramayana for him became Ramayanam. So, this was the great soul. So, these three people had a profound influence on me. Before I decided to step out of home and be on my own, so their blessings were always on me. So, this is what happened before I started off for the Himalayas. At the time I was 19, around 19 and a half, I had written the exams, my final exams, and the results had not yet come. This irresistible desire to go to the Himalayas was kind of eating up all my thought, my mind, my soul, and I was wondering what to do. But then the practical side of my mind came into the picture, and I said to myself, let us make a trial run, because I had never left home before all alone and gone in a place like that. So, I said, let us have a trial run. A friend of mine, a relative of mine actually, an uncle told me that there is a beautiful place in a place called 𝗏 which is in Tamil Nadu, which is close to the Tamaraparni river and not very far from Tirunelveli. There he said that there is a small Sufi setup where Sufi practitioners live together and do their practices, and it also is supposed to contain a small dargah, a shrine, where the sandals of Abdul Qadir Jilani, who is the founder of one of the great Sufi orders called the Qadiriya order of the Sufis, are supposed to be kept there. So, around that it is controlled by someone who is the landlord there, who is called the Inamdar, and who is also the head of the Sufis, the Sheikh, the Guru of all the Sufis in that area. So, I went with an introduction from my uncle, went and met the Inamdar, I forget his name now. They used to live in a big bungalow in the premises of the dargah. So, I went there, and he said, you can stay with me in our house, and he was very interested in discussing matters with me. I found that he was very interested in Vedanta, yoga and things like that. I said, look, I do not want to stay in your house, can I stay quietly in any other place inside the premises? So, he gave me a small cottage which is like the ones the other Sufis were living in. So, I spent some time there, trying as much as possible not to meet people or make any networking, and remaining alone, not talking, doing my meditation. I was also having daily discussions with the Inamdar, the Sheikh, the Guru there, about Sufi teachings and the Qadiriya order and what are their meditation techniques. And the Qadiriya order has a great deal of pranayam as part of their devotional exercises. So, I spent some time. It was nice, very beautiful. The place used to be full of doves sitting and making kind of cooing noises throughout. And I found out that instead of avoiding the cooing of the doves, one could meditate by trying to listen to them quietly. If you listen to them quietly, you hear only the cooing, and the cooing slowly disappears and you are in silence. If you try to avoid, then the mind again brings it back again and again and causes disturbance. Anyway, so I spent some time. Then one of the Sufis told me there, elderly man, that a little beyond, about 20 kilometers away, there was a hill where there was a cave and the tomb of a Sufi, unknown Sufi, where it is a beautiful place to go and meditate. But he said, we have to be careful at night, you are not supposed to go here and there, because there are some evil influences and so on and so forth. So, I said, many people talk about evil influences and I have never seen anything before. So, I thought this must be just stories. Anyway, I decided that it would be a good experience, since I was going to the Himalayas, to go to a non-Himalayan mountain or cave and spend some time and get some practice, like a trial run. So, I went with this man. He also came with me. I think his name was Ibrahim Sahib or something like that. He came with me. Both of us went. We had to go through forest areas, and in the forest areas one would get suddenly frightened when you see huge images made of clay of some gram devatas and all sitting there with big eyes and canine teeth coming out. So anyway, we travelled, and by evening we reached the cave, the hill with the cave and a little tomb. Now there is no place there, you have to sleep on the slope. So we lit a fire and we slept there. We decided to sleep there. Of course, Ibrahim Sahib had his own little drum which he played and sang some nice Sufi songs. So sat there. Then I decided to do my pranayam and meditation. I sat down and meditated. After midnight, after my meditation, I decided to sleep. Now this man was sleeping here and I was sleeping next, and the fireplace was here. Maybe I must have half asleep, about to sleep, half asleep, and there was a stench, very bad stench, like dead bodies, you know how that kind of smell was coming. So I was wondering, where is this? My first thought, of course, being always practical and skeptical, but that there must be some dead bodies or a dead animal in the forest buried. Then I opened my eyes and saw something very strange. There was a old haggard looking woman standing there with her skin and everything hanging down. She had a broom in her hand, and one hand she was holding my shoulder and say, "Come with me, I am suffering, help me, I am suffering," and crying. I was also wondering, what is this happening? I was a little frightened. Then Ibrahim Sahib suddenly hit me on the hand and said, close your eyes, keep chanting your mantra. So I closed my eyes and started chanting. Then she released, that hand was released, and after some time the stench also disappeared, and there was nothing when I opened my eyes. Then this Ibrahim Sahib said, now you sleep, there is nothing to worry. Of course I could not sleep the whole night. Morning I again went to the pond, washed myself, came back and meditated. Then I asked him, what is this? He said, there is some gram devata, some old lady, some who comes in the form of an old lady, whatever. So that was my first experience outside home. I spent 2 days and 2 nights in that place, came back to Puttalpuzhur, spent another 3-4 days in the mosque, in the dargah, and then I came back. I had not informed my parents where I was, so they were shocked. They didn't know. They asked many friends. One of my closest friends was Ranjit Sadashivan, who always knew where I went. Even when I went off to the Himalayas, he was my contact. He knew where I was. So if anybody wanted information, they would ask him, and he would give it only if it is an emergency. Otherwise, he would never let anybody know where I was. So they asked Ranjit, and he said he doesn't know because I hadn't told anybody. I returned, dirty clothes and mundu and all. My mother was relieved. I think she almost fainted when she saw me coming back. Anyway, that was my first experience. After this experience, I was confident that it would be possible for me to go away for a long period of time and stay away from everybody. And of course, the natural route that opened into my mind was the Himalayas. So one Friday, I remember, I went to the Trivandrum railway station and bought a ticket to Chennai, because that time Trivandrum had no direct connection to Madras Central. You had to come to Egmore. Then from Egmore I went to Central. Then I took a train, spent the night there in the station. Took the train to Delhi. It used to take many days to reach Delhi, 2 days, 3 days, 2 days. So I reached Delhi. From Delhi I took the next train to Haridwar. Haridwar I went to a barber and got my head shaved except for a little hair here. Wore a brahmachari dress, gave away everything. Had a bag with the Bhagavad Gita, a pad and a pencil and a water pot which I bought in Haridwar. And with that, now if you look like a brahmachari, then you can survive in those places, there is nothing to worry. So with that, in that vesha, in that dress, I went all over Haridwar, looking around temples, different ashramas, meeting different heads of ashramas, talking to them. Basically, I think I was looking for a spiritual teacher who would take me into his confidence and then guide me properly into the spiritual field. I spent at least maybe a month or two in Haridwar. I met somebody who was a Mahamandaleshwar of that area. He introduced me to some other people staying there, but I found that it was not to my way of thinking, not my way of what I thought was spiritual. Apart from the fact that there were people who thought he was a young educated man and were trying to make marriage matches for me in the ashrams. So I quietly left the place and went off to Rishikesh. Rishikesh, I spent some time, 2-3 months at the Shivananda ashram, which is called the Yoga Vedanta Forest Academy of Shivananda Saraswati. When I went there, Swami Shivananda Saraswati was not there. He had already attained Samadhi. But his disciple Swami Chidananda was there, a very holy, saintly soul, very thin, tall and soft spoken. And I spent some time there. One day, I met Swami Chidanandaji and I had a long personal chat with him. He inquired where I came from, what I was doing. And he said, I think you are not satisfied with all this that is going on. You are probably looking for something different, maybe higher up in the Himalayas. But be careful, there are also many frauds here who say, oh, in 3 days you can get moksha, or who will take money from you, do all kinds of things. Then there are ganja sadhus who do nothing but simply smoke ganja and waste their life. So there are all kinds of people. Be careful, but anytime you are leaving this place, please inform me before you go. I said, fair enough, Swamiji, I will do that. So I stayed there for about 3 months. At the end of 3 months, I went and told him, tomorrow morning I would like to leave because I want to go further up to the Himalayas. He said, all right, how are you going? I said, I am going walking. He said, do you have money? I said, no. He said, do you want to take some money? I said, no. He said, okay, God bless you, and put his hand on my head. I said, all right. So next day, early in the morning, I set out. The same, only one pair of change, dhoti and kurta, half sleeve kurta, bag, kamandalu. Sometime I walked with my rubber chappals, Hawaii chappals. After some time I found that it was difficult to walk with them, so I threw them away. So I walked. My aim was to reach a place called Vashishta Gufa, which is about 21 kilometers from Munikireti in Rishikesh. So I went, walked, and I got very tired. I had some little bit to eat somewhere in a little ashram, nothing much to speak about. I kept walking and walking till my feet became swollen. I had never walked 20 kilometers at a stretch before in my life. And the bottom of the sole of my feet was all swollen like rubber. When I finally reached Vashishta Gufa. There, the Vashishta Gufa is located on the banks of the Ganga. From the road, you have to go down the steps, deep down, and there is a cave there. So when I went there, Swami Purushothamananda, who used to live in Vashishta Gufa in those days, he had passed away, he had attained Samadhi, and a brahmachari who was serving him was there. There was nobody there. There were a few cows as a dining hall with a big jamun tree there, and this brahmachari was staying there. That brahmachari is now become a Swami. I forget his name at the moment. He lives in Vashishta Guha even now and remembers me very often. So when I went, he was also from Kerala. Swami Purushothamananda himself was from Kerala. He was a disciple of Swami Shivananda of the Ramakrishna Mission, Mahapurush Maharaj, and also of Nirmalananda, another disciple of Ramakrishna Paramahansa. Anyway, So, this brahmachari saw me in this state and he took care of me for at least a week till my feet became all right. He fed me, he looked after me, and I used to go and meditate inside the Vashishta Gufa. Vashishta Gufa is a beautiful place to meditate. People who have come with me on my Himalayan trips later on, they will vouch for the fact that once you enter the cave, it's absolutely quiet. You only have a humming sound and quietness and darkness. There are no lights there. If you sit down and meditate, you just fix your attention on the humming sound. It's like pranava, Om being chanted over and over again, and you can go into very deep meditation. I think it will work for people who have also not meditated before. Anyway, so I spent 4-5 days there. Just from the banks of the Ganga, if you walk further up, there is a cave on the top called the Arundhati cave, but I was not aware of its existence at that time. Later on, when I was wandering with my guru, 𝗦𝗿𝗶 Babaji, we have spent many days in the Arundhati cave. That time I didn't know about the Arundhati cave. Anyway, after a few days I told this Swamiji, this Brahmachari ji, that I am going now, I have to go to the Himalayas, further up to Badrinath. So again I started. By then my feet had got cured and they became good enough. It's about a month, I think, good enough for me to walk. So then from then on I never wore any chappals or sandals. I walked barefoot because the soles of the feet had developed calluses and they had become like soles of chappals. Anyway, so I walked, and then that day by evening time I was going through the forest and I was feeling hungry and wondering what to eat, what to do. There was no ashram in sight, when I saw a man coming from there collecting firewood and going. So he asked me, "Oh Maharaj, Brahmachari ji kahan ja rahe, where are you going?" I said, "I am going to Badrinath." He said, "Is there any place to rest here?" He said, "If you can walk 2-3 kilometers with me, you can come and stay with Babaji." When I heard the word Babaji, I was astonished. I said, "Maybe the same Babaji about whom I have heard, about which we have read before." So I didn't know that all Vaishnava sadhus of the Vaishnava Sampradaya in the north, they are all called Babajis. Anyway, so I said, "I'll come." So he took me down near the Ganga. You have to descend about 1 kilometer, and there was a little ashram with a Krishna temple, and there was a Vaishnava Babaji sitting with all namams, big man, and there's a small community staying there. And when I went, Aarti was about to be performed. So with the ringing of the gong and all that, they performed the Aarti. I sat down. Then he told me that I found this brahmachari on the way, he is going to Badrinath. So that Babaji was a very kind soul, very nice soul, man. So he said, "Okay, you have your prasad now and then we can discuss." So I had whatever food was there. And then I went to see him and he sat down and he had a long chat. He gave me after talking to me for 15 minutes, he said, "Do you want the Krishna mantra? I can give it to you." I said, "Well, I'll be very happy to take it, but I am actually in search of a guru." And he said, "All right, but I can give you the mantra." He said, "There are many gurus. Upagurus are those who help you go towards the real guru." Such an humble man. He said, "It doesn't matter, you still take the mantra from me." So he gave me a bija mantra of Krishna from the Vaishnava Sampradaya. He belonged to the Gaudiya Math. So I spent the night there. Next day morning I said to the Babaji, "I am going further up, I am climbing." He said, "I am very happy that you are searching for the truth and for a guru and so on, and you will definitely find the guru. My blessings are with you. But you remember one thing, if you think of taking sannyas, which means becoming a renunciant, giving up the world, it's a very lofty ideal which everybody cannot do." Said only few people can take sannyas, everybody cannot do, because it is such a difficult life. Don't think that it is full of, because you have no work that you will be happy. It's not like that, it's a difficult work. He said, to take sannyas really, it's like climbing up the steps and going to the heights. Now, after going to the heights, if you fall down from that height, it will probably break your bones and it will be very difficult to get up again. You will have multiple fractures, he said. This is the word used. On the other hand, if you have only gone 2 steps, if you fall down, it does not matter. You can still get up and rub off the dust from your back and walk again. So, be very careful about taking sannyas, because it is a very lofty ideal which most people cannot follow. But I said, but Swamiji, Maharaj, there are many sannyasins I see in the Himalayan area in Rishikesh. He said, that is the problem of Kali Yuga. Anybody who does not have a job puts on the saffron robe, and laughed loudly. Then he said, Narayana, Narayana. Anyway, so from there I walked the next day and proceeded towards Badrinath. In Devaprayag, I met the kind of sadhu which was described by Swami Chidananda. There was a guy who was naked, who saw me on the way and said, come, come, you stay with me. I will give you guidance, I will teach you how to meditate. I was a little suspicious, but I went and stayed with him in a small kutir on the banks of the Ganga in Devaprayag. As soon as evening came, he prepared his chillam and put ganja into it and started smoking. Those days, I had not even tried or touched any of these things. So I said, I am not going to. He kept forcing me, have a puff, have a puff, have a pull, it will be nice for you, you will reach Shivam. I said, no, I am not going to. Then he was joined by another Naga sadhu. So he is telling him, this man is a great Shiva yogi, so he does not take siddhi, so let us smoke. So they both smoked, and they were shouting some loud things, and I do not know what they were doing. Anyway, I meditated for the night, went to sleep. Early morning I got up, and without informing anybody, quietly I walked out and started my journey again. So I went, continued like this. On the way I met many sadhus, but I could not relate to them. Some of them must have been great spiritually evolved people, but they were not my cup of tea, because my master was waiting for me and I was waiting for him. So it did not work out, nothing worked out. So on I went travelling. Now, one or two things, somewhere near Nandaprayag, I had a very interesting experience. When I reached there, it was evening, and there was a temple, small temple there, and the priest of the temple was winding up and going home, a Gadwali priest. So he told me, okay, you can sleep here if you like, but there is no food, there is a banana here, you can take it and sleep, I will see you in the morning. So I said, all right. So there is no other place to go. In fact, that temple is still there. Even if you go in the bus on the road, you can see it on the left. It's a Shiva temple. So I was settling down in the temple, when suddenly I heard somebody saying Ram Ram. So I look out of the kutir and I see a man standing there. He says, Maharaj, you must be very hungry, can I get some food for you? Actually, he said, can I get some bhiksha for you? I said, all right, sure, because I was really very hungry. So he said, shall I bring it here? I said, are you living close by? He said, I am very close by, just on the other side. I said, you don't have to bring it here, I will go there. So I went to his house, and his wife was cooking inside. He was a tailor, he had only one sewing machine there. Wearing a white kurta and pajama, the Gandhi topi like thing on it, and his wife made pulkas and sabji and all hot. I was so hungry, I ate the whole thing, and while I was eating, I noticed this man was standing there and crying. So it didn't strike me. I said, why is this? Maybe out of happiness he is crying. So I asked him what happened. He said, you know, I am a Harijan, I am untouchable in this village. No sadhu comes to our house and eats. We are not allowed to go to the temple also. No sadhu comes and eats. So I am filled with joy that God has sent somebody to our house to eat. So that's why I am shedding tears. I am crying. I was very touched by it. Then in the night I went to the temple and I slept. Early in the morning the priest came and started shouting and abusing me like anything. He said, "Get out from here, you have spoiled the temple." I said, "But why?" He said, "How could you are a sadhu, how could you go to that Harijan's house and eat? You have polluted yourself and you are coming here after that and you have polluted the temple. I have to wash it many times before I go." So I said, "Fine." Then I said, I decided maybe I will stay one more day in this area, but I won't go to the temple. So I went straight to the not tailor, I am sorry, he was a cobbler. So I went to him and told him, "Look, can I stay one more night in your place? Then that veranda I can sleep." He was so thrilled, but he said, "Maharaj, please don't stay, you please keep walking." I said, "Why?" He said, "You will stay and tomorrow I will be troubled by these people. They will say, 'Why did you do that? How could you do that?' So they may come upon me, so it is better that you go." So I walked. Anyway, so after many days of walking, maybe about 3 months roughly, 2.5, 3 months, I can't reckon because there was no watch, no calendar. I went by the sunrise and the sunset. I reached Badrinath. So moment I saw, those days you had to, even for Badri you had to walk quite a bit. Now the bus goes right near the temple. So I went to Badrinarayan. I had heard that the chief priest of Badrinarayan, who is called the 𝗦𝗶 𝗠, is a Nambudri Brahmin from Kerala. For 100 years, the Nambudri Brahmins of Kerala are being appointed as priests. From Shankaracharya's time, I think the priests have been Nambudris from Kerala. They are known as 𝗦𝗶. So I went, I thought he will be knowing Malayalam, so we can talk and figure out what to do. So I went to him, and when I went, they were playing cards inside. I could hear the sound of the cards being hit and all that. Anyway, I waited outside and I told him, "I have come from a far off place. I am looking for a guru for spiritual practice. Can you find some place for me to stay?" He said, "I will find you a kutir to stay, but you come back in the evening. I want to talk to you. I think educated young man like you is wasting time here. So after darshanam, better you go back. If you want to spend some time, I will find a kutir for you." His name was Keshavan Nambudripad, I think. Now there is a Keshavan Nambudripad, that time Keshavan Nambudripad. So I spent some time in the Himalayas, staying in the kutir across the Ganga, which was given to me. And one day I decided to walk towards the last border of India on that side, which is called the Mana village, beyond which Tibet starts. So one morning I decided to walk towards the Vyasa Gufa. I had reached Badrinath after a great deal of travel. It took me about 3 months roughly to reach Badrinarayan. And as I said, the priests of Badrinarayan are Nambudris from Kerala. So I went to see the priest, to see the 𝗦𝗶, they are called 𝗦𝗶s, and I had a meeting with him. Interesting. I was given the name of Shiva Prasad at Haridwar by the Mahamandaleshwar, whom I had met first. So I maintained that name. So when 𝗦𝗶 asked me, "What is your name?" I said, "Shiva Prasad." Because I thought these Nambudris are such orthodox people from Kerala Brahmins, so I thought better to stick to Shiva Prasad. So I said, "Shiva Prasad." "Ah, very good," he said. "So you finished your college?" I said, "Almost." "So why are you here?" I said, "I came looking for gurus because I have heard in the Himalayas there are great yogis still living who might be able to guide me, because I'm looking for a true and original Guru. He started laughing. Then he said, I have not met a single genuine soul here. I was shocked. I said, how is this possible? He said, maybe I have, I am not sure, but most of these pseudo sadhus all around here, some of them are very rich, and he gave me such a critical view of this whole thing that I began to wonder, is it right to ask? It was wrong to ask this man. Anyway, I said, all right, but can you find me a place to stay? He said, yeah, that I can find you. I'll find a kutir for you across the river, across the Alkananda. Stay for some time. You can get all your food from here, because the priests of Badrinath are from Kerala. Badrinarayan regularly gets Kerala food to eat. So I decided I will also get good food, and I stayed on. I was missing the food for quite some time. So I stayed on. But every time I met Ravalji, he used to discourage me. He said, I appreciate your search, but you can find it at home also. You are an educated man, you should go back, work for a living. See these buggers, they are all sadhus. Okay. I kind of closed my ears and listened and heard everything that he said, but it didn't register. I was very upset. One day I was so upset, I was so depressed, that I decided that I will walk up to Mana, the last village on the border, full of Tibetan weavers, and then go to Vashishta Gufa, which somebody said is beyond, and see if there is anyone there. If I don't find a proper guru or a teacher, then it is better that I commit suicide, because maybe this body is not ready for spiritual instruction, maybe I am not fit for it. Maybe next time I will come back in a better body, in better circumstances, and find a guru and find spiritual fulfillment. So I said to myself, I will go and see. If I don't find anybody, I stood on the banks of the Alkananda and looked down, and in my mind I was calculating how many minutes it will take to die, because the water flows very strongly with a roaring noise from the top. I said to myself, maybe 2 minutes I will be dead, finished. I will close my eyes, meditate and go. So when you discard the body, you get a better body and come back again for spiritual. With this in mind, do or die, I walked up. So I went up to Vyasa Gufa. There was nothing there. Vyasa Gufa now has become so busy, it's not worth going there. That time there was just a small cave. Then I further went up, almost up to Swarga Arohini, near the rocks where the Saraswati river flows. There is a beam pool there. I went to beam pool, then I was quite depressed and I started walking down. On the way I had to pass the Vyasa Gufa again. So when I reached Vyasa Gufa, I found that there was some fire inside. Somebody must be there. There was a dhuni in the mouth of the Vyasa Gufa. So if there is a dhuni, dhuni is the big fire which is lit by yogis who live in these areas, like a campfire. So I said, if there is there must be somebody inside. So I slowly went into the Vyasa Gufa, not expecting anybody, hoping to see some sadhu. I thought maybe I will spend the night here and meditate. The moment I entered, this person came out of the cave, and I looked at him, and it was the same. It clicked immediately in my mind that this is the same person whom I have seen many years ago when I was a 9-year-old boy playing in the backyard of my house. The man who stood under the jackfruit tree and touched my head, this whole thing flashed into my mind, and I said, I think this is the same person. And unconsciously I exclaimed, Babaji, like that. So, and his first statement was very interesting. He said to me, Acha ghum phir ke aa gaye yahan. You've gone round and come back to me. So I prostrated before him and I said, now all my life till I die, I am not going to leave you. And he said, Dekha jayega, we'll think about it. But then from that time, for 3.5 years, I spent with him, following him wherever he went, learning what he taught, eating what he provided, and living as he wanted me to live. 3.5 years as he travelled, I also travelled. And that night we spent at Vyas Gufa. The next day morning, he took me away from there. We crossed the river, went to a place called 𝗦𝗶 which is behind the Badrinath temple, which has many caves. As you proceed further up, you see caves on the right side from 𝗦𝗶. If you go further, it used to be the old route to Kedar, but nobody goes on that way now because it's all broken and ice filled. So, in one of those caves in 𝗦𝗶 is the place where Babaji used to live. Now, when I say Babaji, many people would immediately think that I am talking about Mahavatar Babaji, about whom Yogananda Paramahansa has written in the Autobiography of a Yogi. I think in recent times, Rajnikant also made a movie on Babaji. No, I am not talking about that Babaji. I am talking about someone whose name was Maheshwarnath Babaji. We used to call him Babaji. In Hindi, Babaji means Appa, father. It means father, mother, everything. So great saints are addressed as Babaji. Maheshwarnath Babaji belonged to the Natha Sampradaya, which is a very old tradition in India. It starts with Adinath, who is considered to be none other than Shiva himself. And from there, Matsyendranath, and from Matsyendranath to Gorakhnath, from Gorakhnath to the other Naths. Gorakhnath is the most famous of the Nath Sampradaya saints, and his headquarters is in Gorakhpur, which is on the border of Nepal almost. Now, Maheshwarnath Babaji belonged to the Natha Sampradaya on one side, and on the other side, he was a direct disciple of Sri Guru Babaji, who is referred to in the autobiography as Mahavatar Babaji. In our tradition, in our parampara, we don't call him Mahavatar, we call him Sri Guru Babaji, because Mahavatar was a word coined by Paramahansa Yogananda, because this particular being is supposed to have lived for so many years. Many other avatars have come and gone, but he continues to live, so he gave the title of Mahavatar. And the picture of Babaji, Sri Guru, we called him Sri Guru Babaji, he was my Guru's Guru. So, normally when I say Babaji, I refer to Maheshwarnath Babaji, who was his disciple, direct disciple. Now, there is a picture of Mahavatar Babaji or Sri Guru Babaji in the Autobiography of a Yogi. Now, that picture is a painting done by the brother of Yogananda Paramahamsa, based on a description given by Yogananda Paramahamsa, who said that he had seen Sri Guru Babaji in a vision. Not actually, but in a vision. This is the picture. Now, why I am mentioning this is because one day when I was walking with Maheshwarnath Babaji, whom I shall continue to refer as Babaji, in Badrinath, I told him that this beautiful picture of our Paramaguru, Sri Guru Babaji, is there in the Autobiography of Yogi. It's beautiful, which I had read. He said, it is beautiful, it's an artist's rendering, but there is another picture which is even more identical to as Babaji looks. So I asked him, where is it? So he said, it is hanging in the bedroom of the Ravalji at Badrinath. So I said, shall we go and see it? He said, Abhi nahi, not now. So I kept quiet. I was like that. He always, when he blew the whistle, I shook my tail and went. And when he blew the whistle, I went away. So when he said, don't want, I said, don't want, fine. Once I even told Babaji, he said, what do you think about yourself? You and me. I said, I think of myself as a dog sitting in front of you, looking at you, listening to you, his master's voice, HMV. And he said, but don't shake your tail too much. Zyada dum nahi hilana, he said. Anyway, so that was our, so I said, okay, fine. Many years later, and then he gave me the history of how that picture of Sri Guru Babaji came to be in the Ravalji's room in Badrinath. Ravalji is the chief priest of the temple. He said there was one priest, one of the Ravaljis, who was a great bhakta of Badrinarayan. So he used to go off when he was not doing puja, free hours, to the back of the temple and meditate in Charana Paduka. So one day when he was meditating in Charana Paduka, he saw a vision. He saw somebody, not vision, he actually saw somebody. Now, according to Babaji, it was Sri Guru. But the Ravalji thought that it was a vision of Badrinarayan, sitting in Padmasana. In Badrinarayan is the only form of Narayana who sits in Padmasana in meditative pose. So when he came back home to his room, he was an amateur artist. So using vegetable colors, he painted a picture of whom he saw, who he thought was Badrinarayan, but it is Sri Guru or Mahavatar or whatever you want to call him. That picture was lying in the room of the bedroom of the Ravaljis for many years. This was the picture, and that is the picture which I have used in my autobiography. You will find a picture of Sri Guru Babaji, which is a copy of the picture that hangs even today in the bedroom of the Ravaljis. Now the Ravaljis have come to know that it is Sri Guru, so they have taken prints and kept it in front. When they sit, there is also a picture of Babaji there. Now, this picture came to me because once we went to Badri Kedar in Rishikesh, Nanu came with us, and he is an amateur photographer, but he is almost a professional. So he had a beautiful camera which looked somewhat like here, and with that we went to then Ravalji and asked his permission, can we take a picture? They didn't know at that time what it was. They said it has been lying here for years. It is a painting of Badrinarayan. I said, can we take a picture of that? He said, no problem. Vishnu 𝗦𝗶 was the Ravalji at that time. So then Nanu, with his camera and lights and all that, he took a close-up of that, and then he printed it and distributed it to us. And that is the picture that you will find in my autobiography. It is very similar to the one in Autobiography Yogi, but it is a little more, according to Babaji, more resemblance to Sri Guru Babaji, and it is a little roughly done. It's not very finely done. Anyway, so I stayed with Babaji, with Maheshwarnath Babaji, in the cave at Charana Paduka behind the Badrinath temple, and I spent many days with him off and on. We used to travel and come back again, stay there. Many of the lessons which I learned, much of the knowledge that I had gained, which is with me today, and because of which I am able to teach people, those who want to learn, came from those days of instruction in Charana Paduka. I learnt not only how to study Vedanta, how to practice meditation, or how to practice Kriya Yoga, which is our parampara. I also learnt how to cut vegetables, how to cook food, how to go for bhiksha, how to keep the kutir clean. Babaji told me once, if you cannot cut vegetables properly, you cannot understand Vedanta. He was a real taskmaster and a real teacher who taught me every little thing, how to live, what to do. Of course, I may not have been such a perfect disciple, so I might commit mistakes, but this was the teaching, the instruction. And he was more than a father and mother. I think he was father, mother, friend, all guru, all rolled into one. I never kept anything in my mind. I exposed my mind to him and he worked on it in his own way. Sometimes actual work, sometimes invisible work, which you cannot make out until the results come forth. So this was my life with 𝗦𝗿𝗶 Babaji. Now before I end my story about Sri 𝗦𝗿𝗶 Babaji, I must mention one more thing, which is that he was one of the oldest and the earliest direct disciples of Sri Guru Babaji. And in the Autobiography of a Yogi, there is a mention of Lahiri Mahashai, who was Shyamacharan Lahiri was a very advanced yogi and a disciple of Mahavatar Babaji. So in that story, in the autobiography, there is a mention of Lahiri Mahashai going to the Himalayas and meeting Sri Guru Babaji in the cave. That cave is still there. It's in UP near Dwarahat. Now, in that, Babaji sent somebody to him, to Shyamacharan Lahiri, saying, go and bring him inside and show him something. Now, this person who was sent by him to fetch Shyamacharan Lahiri inside was 𝗦𝗿𝗶 Babaji. It's not, his name is not mentioned in the autobiography because the author of the autobiography did not know who he was. He has only mentioned that he sent one of his advanced disciples to bring him inside. This is 𝗦𝗿𝗶 Babaji. Now, how did he look? His picture is there in my autobiography. It is not a photograph. It's also a painting, because Sri Guru Babaji was dead against being photographed. He always resisted being photographed. And knowing that I was myself an amateur artist, he prohibited me from painting or drawing any likeliness of himself, because he was he was against any form of people worshipping him in any way. He was a man who walked barefoot all along the Himalayas, or even when he came back down the Himalayas, barefoot, no ashram, no organization, no banner. The only thing he possessed was a white cloth which reached from the waist to the knees, and a kamandalu and a rudraksha mala on his neck. There was nothing else that he possessed, not even a pair of Hawaii chappals. And he never got into any vehicle. He always walked, no bus, no car, always walking. And therefore I was also forced to walk with him wherever he went, whenever I was with him. He was a thin, tall man, well built, very fair, with a sparse beard and moustache, and with his hair, matted hair, jata, tied up like a big cone on the top of the head. His eyes were the most extraordinary, because very often questions which were difficult to be understood through discussion and argument could be understood by his mere look into your eyes. That was the most special quality of Babaji that I know of, that I have heard of. Anyway, so I lived with this great being for some years. Now I must tell you the story of Babaji's picture, which is now in the autobiography, how it came about. Even though Babaji had told me not to take a picture of him, not to photograph him, not to paint any picture of him, one day in my innocence and ignorance, I decided that I would somehow get a photograph of his. And that's an interesting story by itself. We used to live in Rishikesh for some time, in a place called the Gufa of 𝗦𝗶 𝗦𝗶's cave, which is on the other side of the Ganga. In the evening we used to cross over onto this side, sit on the banks of the Ganga in a quiet spot and have lot of discussions for 1 or 2 teaching sessions, Upanishads. I have studied many things sitting there. So, now this story which I am going to relate about Babaji's photograph is not in this autobiography. It will probably come in the sequel which I am working on now. So, every evening we used to come across, sit on the steps and talk. One day in Lakshman Jhula, if you go, you will find lot of photographers there for tourists. They will say 5 minutes photograph and they will give it to you and the next day a print. So, in that way I became very friendly with a young photographer, 𝗦𝗿𝗶 boy, who used to be hanging around Lakshman Jhula. So, one day I told him, why don't you do me a favor? In the evening I sit in such and such a spot and I have discussions with Babaji. You come there, you don't even show that you know me, you come from the ghat side, keep photographing everything, in between take a quick shot of Babaji also and then walk up, and then don't see me, tomorrow I will see you and take the photograph. He agreed. So that evening around 5 I was becoming more and more nervous. I thought, suppose Babaji comes to know somehow and he says, today we won't cross to that side, what will happen? But promptly at 5 o'clock he said, chalte hain us taraf. So I said, okay, fine. As of now everything is working according to my plan. So we came on to this side. We sat down on the steps of the ghat, the upper steps, and we started discussing something. I waited, I couldn't find this photographer anywhere. So many people were coming and going, but there is no photographer. So we waited till around dusk when the sun is about to set. At about 6:30, Babaji suddenly said to me, "Oh, तुम्हारा photographer अभी नहीं आएगा." He said that your photographer is not going to turn up now. I had not mentioned to him about the photographer at all in the first place. So I was shocked, so I fell at his feet and sought forgiveness. I said, Babaji, I am very sorry. I so value your photograph that I somehow wanted to do it. I won't repeat this ever. I am very, very sorry about this. So Babaji said, doesn't matter, it is all right. And we went back to the cave, to 𝗦𝗶's cave, and that day, that evening in 𝗦𝗶's cave, I got a beautiful discussion. I got a beautiful lesson on photography. It was very beautiful. He said, suppose your photographer had come, suppose, and he had clicked. What if my picture wouldn't have come? How would you stop it? I said, how can you stop it, Babaji? Because if a photographer clicks, it will certainly come in the film. He said, how does an image come in the camera? I said, how? He said, if there is an image and if light falls on it, that light reflects back from the object and goes to the lens and you get the picture. Suppose I know some way by which I can prevent the light that falls on me from reflecting back. Is it possible to take a photograph? I said, no. He said, that is what would have happened. If the photographer had come, he would not have got a picture. He would probably have got a black outline. That's all he could have got. Because all the light, when it is absorbed, it is black. If all the light is reflected together, it is white. So I got a nice discussion on what light is and how it is affecting and how photography takes place. This whole thing. So this is the story of how I tried to photograph Babaji. Then how did I get the picture in the autobiography? Many years later, while in Madanapalli, one summer morning, I decided that I would make a picture of Babaji, because I thought that stricture was laid many years ago. Now it would have gone. So at least for my own satisfaction. So nobody was at home. I took a drawing board, fixed a white drawing paper onto it with pins, took Indian ink and a brush, black brush, and from my memory I made a beautiful outline of Sri Guru Babaji. Now it was a May day, mid-May, and there were no clouds anywhere there, no sign of rain, absolutely clear sky. I left it outside on the veranda to get some air. I had my lunch and went up to sleep. I woke up from the sleep when I heard rain, heavy rain. There was thunder. So it suddenly occurred to me that I had kept a picture outside to dry. So I came running down, and what do I see? There water and wind have completely wiped the thing out, and there was only the soaked drawing paper sitting there. This was my second attempt at capturing Babaji. Then, when the autobiography was going to come out, I said it is unfair to the readers that we don't have Babaji's picture when I keep saying Babaji, Babaji, Babaji. Sri Guru Babaji's is there. What about 𝗦𝗿𝗶 Babaji? So I decided once more let me try an outline. So I sat down and made an outline. There is an art teacher in our school, boarding school, in the People Grow school called Sharat. I took this drawing to him and I said to him, can you make some alterations to this and show me the result? Make a few frames. He is a graphic designer also. So he made a few frames. I approved of one of them, and that picture is the one that you find in the autobiography. It was done for the purpose of the readers. Even after it was done, I was wondering when it would disappear, but it didn't disappear till it was printed.